Hi, I'm Mark Honeybone from Property Ventures, and welcome to our podcast where we interview prominent members of the investment community along with other professionals in the New Zealand property market. To check us out, take a look at propertyventures.co.nz. We hope you enjoy today's podcast.
All right. Hello all, and thanks for coming in and listening. Lessons from the last downturn, and I've got three topics to talk about, and afterwards I'll talk about similarities and differences between the last downturn and this one, and then some general tips for investors. But the first thing that Serena wanted me to talk about was cash flow and equity. Do you buy or sell, best bang for your bucks, and how to keep a healthy mindset. I haven't got any PowerPoints today, so it's just listening to me, and I'll try to be as clear as I can because sometimes I aren't. With that, I thought, geez, where do you start? And we're talking downturn from the financial crisis in 2007 and 8, and I was very involved with property right then. I mean, there's been many. It's really weird. I think the more technology gets modern, the quicker the cycles happen. And I think it's not the first cycle we've had within that time. I think there's a second cycle, particularly in Auckland. I know about 5 or 6 years ago, we had a really hot market for about a year and a half. And then again, it died. It wasn't only Auckland, it was all New Zealand too. And they brought in LVR rules of 40% for the first time. So we did see a mini cycle, I guess, at that time. Then again, of course, we've gone very hot market the last sort of 2.5 years until December just gone. So we said lessons from the downturn, and I picked up on the last point she wanted me to start off with was to keep to a healthy mindset. And I thought I'll start with a healthy mindset because I know I had my own issues back in 07 and 8, and I didn't have a very healthy mindset because of it. And So when I'm talking today, it's clearly not from a salesperson's point of view trying to get sales. It's purely from an investor mindset, and that's really what I'm going to focus on here now. So healthy mindset, and a part of this, I think, setting you up to have a healthy mindset or not has already happened. It's by not making not making mistakes and putting yourself under financial pressure. Now, much of that had to do with December last year was what had you done right at that point? If you had bought a whole lot of places at the height of the market then, and you still got them and they've gone down 10%, your mindset might not be that healthy. So this is one of those conversations, easy to have the conversation afterwards, what you should have done before, but also a few things as we go through. But as your bad decisions right at the downturn of December or just before might be affecting that mindset today. But to help with that mindset is one thing is not being in a rush, especially after a market has just crashed or had a downturn. We'll call it not a crash, just a downturn. And it's going to be a larger downturn than some, I think, this time around. Don't be in a rush. Just wait to see what happens. Wait for 6 months. That's already happened. No one's brought in the last 6 months. Generically speaking, obviously, but it is coming up. Sort of May will be 6 months since the market has been like this. So that's happened. People will just stop, back up the bus, and go, well, okay, what's happening here? How far is it going to go down? What are the reasons for it? And we'll talk about some of them today. So not being in a rush is pretty important when it happens, sort of thing. Just things like if you're buying, knowing your areas you're buying in is more important after a downturn has happened more than ever, because you don't want to pay too much money for a property. One thing I'm going to talk about is, again, the basics of real estate. The basics of investing, the basics of investing now is more important than ever. it's more important now than when the market's going up. It doesn't really matter. You can make mistakes, and it's still going up 10, 15, 20% a year. Your mistakes get hidden very easily. So now to do the basics of where you're buying, is it in a good area, is it around public transport and schools and all those good things are really important. So you make your money when you buy, so you also make it by holding on to it for a long period of time. But yeah, so you want to buy well. So really important that you do the basics really well and buy well. And when I say buy well, when the market comes like this, it's not only about the price you pay; it's about the clauses and that you put in the contract that you want to work with. It's all starting to turn to having to go unconditional on everything to get a good property. I've now actually been patient, backing up the bus a little bit, and saying, hey, actually, I don't want to settle this for 6 months. Let's put that down in the contract. Or I don't want to, whatever. Let's put that in the contract. So you can negotiate well, and you can be patient. And patient if you can. A lot of people have to buy properties for good reasons. They can't be patient. So yeah, if you're buying a new build from a developer and it's got a set price, you've got to pay that price. Well, so yeah, if it fits your criteria, you still can. But there isn't especially the initial after a downturn, you don't need to rush in and buy, because the power's sort of gone back to you, I guess, rather than the owner, like it's been for far too long. So a good time for property investors, and what's coming up is a very good time for property investors. Excuse me. So then the question that Serena asked about cash flow versus equity. It's an interesting question always in investing. Some people were purely cash flow only, and other people were just, it's all about the equity gain. And for me, it's always been about, it depends. It depends on what your goals are, of course, and what you're trying to achieve. But they both do interlink, and this is one of the time they really interlink really, really closely, the cash flow and equity. So obviously with the downturn, the biggest change is equity, right? You've just had a market going like that. You've gained a whole lot of equity, which is really good. But you might have brought here, you might have brought here, you might have brought there. So it depends on how long you've had that property. You might have brought there, and that may cause a bit of an issue. So when the downturn happens, it can, and your equity will change quickly. So obviously, if it's, we were picking a month and a half ago that the market had gone 10% down, not in all of Auckland, but a lot of Auckland had dropped 10%. Now they're starting to say that and saying it's going to drop 10%. Who knows, But it goes down. It has gone down already, and will it go down more? Don't know, but there's a possibility that it will a little bit more. So so your equity goes down, and so because of that, when equity goes down, your cash flow becomes really important. I'm not just talking the cash flow of the property. The days of 7-8% yields of, I won't say long gone, but very few and far between getting something like that. So it's not all about the cash flow of the property. It's cash flow of what you earn, and if you put money into the property. Some people won't, but some people do. So it's all about your cash flow. This is one of the most important times of having cash, always having your cash flow right within your portfolio, and that's whether you're putting money in or not. Now, one of the reasons for that is banks change their rules all the time. We've seen that a lot in the last 6 months, and in particular, when one of the reasons sometimes the downturns happens is because the banks will say in an investor sense, the rules have changed for the worse. It's made lending harder. So the last thing you want to do if your equity has gone down, and you might have got a 80% loan, you might have got a 60% loan, and for second-hand 60% is where it is, and you've got that. If this has dropped down all of a sudden, your equity isn't 40% anymore. It might only be 30% if you've got on the property. So the last thing you want to do is go to the bank when you've only got 30% property, because you've got bad cash flow or whatever it might be, and ask for something more. What I've seen happen numerous times in the last 15 years, and numerous times even in the last 2 years and year, is if that happens, that the banks will sometimes say, thanks, hard luck about that, but we won't give you your refinance, we won't give you your whatever. We actually want you to sell that property right now. and I've seen that. And I saw a chap about a year and a half ago. He had about 12 properties, and an older gentleman, and they wanted to take all 12 properties off him. I had a good friend in Marlborough, in Blenheim, in the 07-08 down cycle. He had 8 properties. They took 7 properties off him because his cash flow on one property got bad. And that's what happens. So the old cash flow equity thing, it's never for me been a one or the other. It's both. Both are very, very important. Cash flow keeps the bills paid, and equity is where you make your money when it does go up. It doesn't always go up, and we've just seen that now when it does go down slightly. So that are both really important. The cash flow for any your portfolio, you should be able to service your property when you buy a property, and that's whether you're chucking $100 into a week or nothing. So that's really important. Equity, you should just have had some good equity increase in the last 6 months or year or 2 years, depending on how long you've had the property. So now's a good time. You're getting yourself in a really good situation to buy. When the market goes bad, that's the best time to buy. To be cashed up, ready to go. So that's important. So what I say normally is you get your equity, get the market turning, wait for 6 months, and then start looking around and start getting ready to buy and start building your portfolio up. What's going to happen? There's going to be more sales will happen. I won't say they've happened just yet. They've seen a few, but of what I have seen already, and I had another one yesterday on the phone. I sold one about a month ago from someone who brought in the last few years, and they now can't. The bank have said they can't afford the property, and they've been given a deadline. Had one yesterday. The deadline's on the 20th of May. They have to have it sold, or they're going to mortgage sale. So simple as that. When I say sold, it has to have an unconditional sale by the 20th of May. So that's going to happen a bit more. So that provides opportunity when you're cashed up, ready to go, which is great for investors for a buy and hold or whatever they might be doing. So that's happening. People will need to sell. Other interest rates are increasing, and that's going to hurt a lot of home buyers that have brought in the last, I'd say, 3 or 4 years. So there's going to be those buyers are going to be selling. There's also some investors, and I've seen a few of them already. A lot of investors, they're speculators, I guess. Not bad-mouthy speculators. I was one for a while. And so some buy quite a few properties on long settlements, 12-month settlements, 10-month settlements, which is fantastic. Not so fantastic if you bought it in November last year, and it might be worth $2.5 million at the height of the market. And in December the market crashed, and now we're sitting here in May, and that property might be worth 10-20% less than it is. Not such a good situation. So those situations will happen. Hopefully, as investors, we can help each other out somehow. But those properties will come. I know one very big name investor about the 07-08 had dozens of properties with long settlements, and it didn't turn out too well for that individual with that. And because they just you can't always pick when the market's going to turn. I had some people telling me in middle of last year the market's never going to go down; it's always going to go up, sort of thing. And I argue black and blue that no, and it's going to get near it sometime soon. But when, I didn't know. So that happens. It's just the way it is. Excuse me. So what else we got here? We got remember people still need to sell for normal reasons. So people have to they shift house, they shift areas, they shift a whole lot of they move towns, they move whatever that they need to. What I also think, excuse me, what I also think is in the next 2 or 3 years we're going to see many investors in the bright line rules who, because of bright line rules, will be selling. They've got sick of the government's reasons for all the rules they've been bringing in, and they're getting ready to sell their property because they're just waiting for that bright line rules to come in so they don't pay their tax on their property. And I've seen that already. So there's going to be a lot of reasons why people are selling. There's it's hard to get money at the moment. it's a really good time for the cashed up investors to take advantage of the next 2 years, and you'll probably find some of you out there will get some of your best buys ever in the next next 2 years from now. So that's important. Cash flow, I've also got written here, obviously always an interesting conversation. As I said, having sustainable cash flow is the most important thing when the market goes down. I'll probably really sort of cover that a little bit, but if you hopefully you've had if you're 40% equity in the property and it goes less than that, just don't go to the bank. And that's where I've seen people before. They've gone to the bank maybe for a real innocent situation, the Dorothy mortgage, and it's ended up costing them having to sell their property that they didn't want to do. So that's all. Yeah. So that's a sad side of things, but that's it. And that's a wee tip that I have. Talk to a Chris Peterson Mortgages or your broker or someone about that if you have a problem. And ask them that before you go in, guns blazing, saying I want to check on this or check on that. Just be careful and maybe ask for their advice. But I've seen too many people lose their portfolios because of that. What else I've got written down? I've got a great time to buy when the market goes like it is. You have the control again, prices and terms of sale and purchase agreement. So you get to choose when you want to sell, when you want to buy, and you get to choose the prices of it. Not all the times. One really important point to take, and if this is the market goes up or down, but particularly when it goes down, in my opinion, it takes vendors, I'll say 3 to 12 months to accept that the market has turned and has gone down. And I'm still seeing people right now who still think the market, so they know the market's not going like that, but they know the market has turned a little bit, but they still think they're going to get X dollars for their, back up in December prices, they're going to get it. Well, they're not. They're going to be down here in April, May 2022 prices. So every vendor's different. We talked to a vendor yesterday with listing their property. They know, they've realised. So they're going, let's sell now because maybe the market might even drop a little bit more in the next 3 or 4 months. So they're realistic people, which is really good. So that's of course when it goes up, it's the other way around. People are still slow to realise, but they don't take them about a month to realise their place is worth more than not. So that's sort of what happens around that side of things. So that's sort of a question on, I guess, the cash flow and equity, buying or selling, best bang for your bucks, how to keep a healthy mindset. I guess if you've got any more questions on that, you can send them through to Serena. We can have a bit of a chat about it shortly. So the second question that I got was similarities and differences between the last downturn and this one. And well, the first thing you go is it's COVID now. That must be the major difference. Well, in my opinion, it's not. I don't think COVID has a heck of a lot to do with the with this downturn. It's much bigger than that. And I'm probably going to have a bit of a bleat, and I apologise. I'm going to have a bit of a bleat, and I apologise if I upset anyone. But it's just what my opinion is, what I've seen. I was lucky enough to be in Queenstown presentation 2 weeks ago with a group called the New Zealand Initiative, who they don't care, they don't have favourites of governments or anything, but they it was really good there. They're the best businessmen of New Zealand. They've got a common goal, and that's making New Zealand a better place. So it's really good to be down there and amongst those people, and I learned quite a bit down there. So it's not a go at the current government, even though it will sound like I haven't go at the current government. But it really affects, I think, the difference between this downturn and previous ones that I've seen, which is really only two others I've seen in the last 20, 30 years. So for me, it's nothing about COVID. It's just more of the property cycle. The property cycle, it goes around and gets to a certain extent. It can't go too much higher for a while, and there's usually rulings and financing rules and stuff that change. In my opinion, for this time, I think the government's made a hash of everything to do with property in the last 3 or 4 years, or in a bit longer, and probably started with a couple of things when the previous one was in. But they've overdone the housing rules immensely, in my opinion, and without looking at the consequences of what might happen if they do a particular action. The government's had far too much of an influence over the Reserve Bank, and been made far too many short-term focused changes without really getting evidence on how this in the past has happened and how it will affect the future. A lot of what we talked about in Queenstown was evidence-based stuff before you make decisions. One problem I see with the government is it just appears to be centralised to a group of 4 or 5 people that make really big decisions, and they're becoming and controlling. They're really controlling also being the CEOs of some really big major economic drivers of the country, and that relationship's unhealthy for the country in particular sectors. And like now, one money in for the Reserve Bank are one of these. Well, my opinion is the job of the government's to make policy and let the CEOs implement the best way to do that. That's what they do. They're the specialists in there, whether it's medical or housing or medical, whatever. They're the specialists, not the MPs, not the Prime Minister. They get out there, they do evidence-based research, and they're not guessing or thinking something might work before they bring it in as a policy. They do the evidence and make sure it's going to work and do it properly. In my opinion, they haven't looked at the big picture of all the rules changed in the last 4 or 5 years. And I'm talking the converted here anyway. But, we've had healthy homes, we've had heat pump regulation, we've had the RTA, rental agreement changes, the tax loss changes, which has cost people an average of about $8,000 a year on average, $1 million property. Bright line rules changes, LVR changes, and this has already taken a massive hit on property investors, and a lot of them want to sell now. And on that point, I can see more, as I said before, more putting their properties on the market when bright line rules allow them to do so. What they've done now is they're bringing in the triple CFA, and that's in December immediately stopped sales happening. That's it, immediately stopped it. So, and what's happening, unfortunately, now, good people on good incomes and good equity still can't get lending. And I'm talking about home buyers. I'm also talking about investors. I know some awesome investors. I know one very particularly well-do with everyone knows who'll be listening to this call that's in such a great position, and are struggling to get what I think is considering a pretty small loan when they've got a massive equity and what have you, but because they're self-employed, they're really struggling to get get a no-brainer loan to give out. So that's so for me with that's pretty well the major change between this and the previous downturn. I think they've gone too far. Finance tightening is always one of the major factors, obviously, as I just said, of the softening market. But there's way too much happening in such a short time, and I think it's really irresponsible of the government what they're doing. They're now increasing interest rates as well at a speed that's going pretty quickly, and that's, as I said, it's putting average New Zealanders under stress, and will be a ruin for financial ruin for quite a few of those people, and they will have to have their have mortgage sales to sell their property. As I said, I've picked 2 up in the last very, very short time. Then you get some of the business owners, and some of you might be in this particular field, in the hospitality field. You've been hit incredibly, as we know, the last 2 years. You've been hit with the extra taxes if you earn over 190,000, whatever it is, and then a whole lot of other bits and pieces there. You've had staff, you've had increases in staff. They've really hit it so well. And what I think I started to see was just before December, there was every reason that investors were starting not to buy property, and that was already happening. So that was part of my conversation with some people, as I said last year. It had to stop really quickly, and the more rules that come in, the more that was happening. So now, so they were feeling the pinch, and they changed another rule back to the 40% LVR except for new builds. They wanted people to buy new builds. Investors, and some of you probably listening to this, that would have never touched a new build once, were all of a sudden buying new builds. So the government almost had what they had. They were slowing property investors down. They were getting them buying new builds, which is good. Good for the rental market, good for the healthy homes. Everything the government wanted was perfect. Well, not perfect by any means, but getting better, we'll say. And then with the CCFA rules are not getting lending, that's just incredibly dried right up now. And we see the issues we're in. So that's the end of my bleat on where I see the downside, but that's where I see the similarities and differences. Is I think it's just gone too far this time, too far by a long way, and they still can't get money, and it's going to take a while for that to happen. So, and that's causing a lot of other issues, sort of thing. There's going to be a lot of people out there that won't be able to get rentals, and they can't now. There's a real problem, a real demand on rental properties at the moment. So that's that's my belief, I guess, on the similarities and differences on the this downturn and the last downturn. So just to summarise, for have a look at anything, any other questions or anything, is some of the what was the last one was general tips for investors. So I've always sort of said to them, but just to summarise, I guess, is get prepared to pounce. If in a perfect world, your assets in a perfect world, you would have revalued all your assets in November, right before December happened, and you're sitting pretty and got a whole lot of equity. You can go and buy property. It might be too late to do that right this second, but we'll see. Avoid, as I said, going to the bank unless you purchase a home or investment, or you got good equity and good cash flow. The cash flow is a big one now that's stopping people getting lending. And we won't even go into that. I'm sure Chris Peterson's talked about, and Ryan have talked about that enough to you all. But as I said, I had a good friend. He lost 8 properties this time in the market back in 07, 08. He didn't have great. He had the minimum equity. It went down. He had great cash flow in all those properties. And he went to sell one property, and they said, "No, sorry, mate, you've got to sell all your properties. You've only got 15 or 10% equity in these properties. You need 80% or 70%, whatever it was." And they took them all off him. So if you've got equity, it's time to shine. As I said, some of your best buys will probably be in the next couple of years from now. All those rules you learn at APIA and all those events you go to, the how to invest well, they're more important now than ever. And as I said, the basics are imperative right now. It's just like I had a chat to our agents out there yesterday with about being an agent. Slack agents have done well lately. You've got to be the best agent you can be right now to do really well in this market, and you'll still do really well. Same as investing. Still do all the basics, and you'll do very well investing. You can still trade. I traded property in a down market from about 2010 to about 2014 or 15. Great trading time, and there weren't many people in the market. It was a great time to buy really discounted properties and do well. But again, you have to use the basics of property investing again to get well. You don't just go and buy something knowing it's going to go up next week $40,000. That's not going to happen anymore. So you've got to make, create, or buy that when you purchase it. It's time to start to building your portfolio again. When the market's been hot for 2 years, I've said previously on the same forum, now's the time to sell your underperforming properties when the market's really hot, because someone's going to pick it up and buy it. Now's the time to go back, and you've got a good portfolio, hopefully. Now hunting out those properties are going to help your portfolio, whatever your strategies and goals are and what you're trying to do. Last one I've got here is important, of course, to have your long-term goals and that you're set for a downturn. It shouldn't really, if you're doing well and you're investing and you're 40% maximum sort of equity in any of your properties, and your cash flow is enough. I said whether it's your cash flow for your properties or the cash flow from that plus stuff you're putting into your properties, regular weeks, monthly, whatever you're doing, you can ride through it. It's time to be able to ride through that. So so that's pretty well. I think just another one on the traders. I had as I said, it's just always got to be careful. We had back in 07, 08, but back 4 years ago when the market was very hot and then stopped. I was working very closely. I was selling some properties to a couple of traders, and I just said, just be careful. They started out and they're doing really well. I said, just wait. The market will turn soon. It's not going to go, forever and ever. I can see it might stop tomorrow. It might stop in 6 months. I don't know, but this is going to stop sometime soon. And they said, just hold enough. have your bail out plan always. So it's when you come into hot market, if you to a trader, have that bail out plan where, okay, if the market turns tomorrow, I've got 3 properties, am I okay if I have to hold them for 3 years? Because that's the decision you've really got to make sometimes. It's like now, sometimes people are so close to selling their property, they want a little bit more money. Just go, that's fine. Are you okay? Just, make sure you're okay. If you don't accept this, you might have been in the market for 3 months and this is the first offer you've had. Just make sure that you're okay, that you can ride through the next 3, 6, 12 months, whatever. Not salesman talk. It's just just logic talk, I think. For I guess you get ingrained in these wee parts of your life, and you sometimes don't think about the big picture. You might go under a bit of stress or what have you, and you got to look at the big picture from what it is. So that's pretty well what I've got here for today. I've seen a couple of questions come up.
Let's start with Brian's questions. Do you have one question? Do you have any tips for increasing cash flow during the downturn? I think Brian means like the last downturn. How did you increase your cash flow? Did you look at rent increases, that sort of stuff?
Oh, okay. For increasing cash flow during downturn. Well, I guess that's the time when investors traditionally try to, there's not much to do sometimes when you're not buying a lot and you don't want to sell, sort of thing. So that's sort of the time, I guess, generally where you get out there and maybe increase that, just do the wee reno or just tidy the property up or put that 4th bedroom you've been talking about for a long time. There's no real the tips of cash flow are just normal. It doesn't matter if you're in a downturn or not, but it seems to be when more people actually spend time on it, because there's not so much more to do with investing. They might not be looking at buying for a while, or even though it's a great time to buy, but they might not be looking at selling or anything. So they just might have more time to do it. I think during COVID, people have actually done that anyway. A lot of people have actually spent time doing it. The interesting thing about right now, and that's a part of what I said about, and my big thing is, as I've alluded to a little bit, and I was getting a bit stroppy in the middle of last year, sitting at home by myself and wanting to do videos I never did. Just saying, I think we're coming up with one of the biggest, in the next 2 years, the biggest problems the government's ever seen of people not being able to find rentals. And I think there's going to be hundreds of thousands of people more who can't find a rental in 2 years' time than there's ever been in the history of being shortage of rentals. So I think it's going to cost the government billions of dollars probably to fix that problem of housing people in the next 2 years to come. Because I think there's a lot of investors are going to be selling in the next 2 years, again, as I alluded to, when they're when they aren't going to be taxed on selling their property. So that the good upside of that is obviously the cash flow for this time round is probably going to be a better problem, or less of a problem than it has been in previous downturns. If that helps at all.
From a question from Anne, can you talk about the media's effect on investor psychology during the downturn?
Effects on investors.
I mean, obviously you're not a psychologist, but maybe talk about, the...
Unfortunately, it's not really got much to do with the downturn. I don't think there's been a lot of doom and gloom for property investors in the last 4 or 5 years, sort of thing. And it's just, one after another. They should bring one in and wait for 5 years and then bring another thing in, not chuck everything in 1 and 5 years, sort of thing. So that's been pretty hard for investors. And even just before and after the last downturn, with my presentations I do, all the meetings we have at Ponsonby, there was a lot of anger, I guess, amongst investors with that. So the media's effects, the media's the thing. I take what the media say when I read something, when I hear something. Even sometimes listening to something like this, the speaker or the writer or the columnist might have an agenda, and usually they do have an agenda. And so I always read an article or hear something on the media with what's the agenda of that person, and for me that almost deletes the sometimes that article, and that's because they have, and real estate agents have an agenda usually when they're in front of someone, sort of thing. This one is a disclosed at the front. This one, I'm definitely haven't got an agenda to sell real estate, because I've just told you, 6 months after a downturn, don't buy. So so I guess for me personally, it doesn't really affect me too much. I'm reasonably strong-willed anyway, but I guess during the downturn, you just sort of so I was actually looking more from actually the COVID. Sorry, studying that COVID. Yeah, so during the downturn, time on looking at opportunities. There's not that many. It's really weird when the downturn, in the middle of a downturn, if it's a 2 or 3 year downturn or 4 year downturn, like in 07, 08. It was 4 years. The market did nothing, and it was a great time. People just didn't buy, and I couldn't really believe it because at some type stage it is going to go up. So if you can buy a property and then buy really, really well, and with good clauses and stuff for you to do that, it's a great time to do it. So I'd stay positive and go, okay, hey, the next pick now. No one's got a crystal ball to say if it's going to last for 6 months or 6 years. But if you think it's going to happen for a little while, start planning. Go, okay, what have I got? Where am I at? Actually, what can I could actually probably borrow another $1 million or whatever it might be. What should I do? Where should I buy? Okay, because you can be picky and choosy in the next 2 years, and the longer it goes, the pickier and choosy you can be. So that's what I'd be concentrating my time on.
Oh, good tip. Question from Calvin. Do you think this government or future governments would undo any of the changes? And I think he's referring to the changes that have been impacting investors, in particular interest in position.
I don't know. I think the one change, I think National said, isn't it, that they will change the tax laws. Because I don't listen to the media, I actually don't listen to the media as much as I should. I should listen to it a lot more. But I'm pretty sure that I heard they said they're going to change all the tax increases. I think so. It might people are on a 39% higher tax rate. That might change. But as far as housing goes, I don't know. When I was down at my conference, I was 2 minutes away from getting the perfect interview with Chris Luxon. And I said about seeing him after he spoke, and he said, "No, I haven't got time, but how about I do it right now?" I thought, yes. And the question I was going to ask him was the Labor government, they obviously, from the property investor's point of view, they haven't valued the importance of a property investor within the country society. And that was the question. And I was going to say, what's your comment on that? And are you going to, do you value it different? So I never got that out. He started talking to me about it, but we never got to do it because he got hijacked by about 10 other people before his presentation. Then he was gone. But he said he will give me a 2 minutes in the car in a couple of weeks' time. So we'll see. A different reason. So who knows? Who knows is the answer. But obviously the taxes. He said he'll change the taxes, so some of them might help property investors. Whether he would look at going back, or maybe did he say about that they're not claiming our losses anymore? I don't know. Something tells me he might have talked about that, or that is on the case, but I don't know.
I think I do follow the media, so I think both the ACT Party and National had come out to explicitly say that they will repel interest limitation if they form if both of them or either of them forms a government, and that I don't recall anything being said about ring fencing. In saying that, I feel like this is just a reminder for people about the importance of sustained activism and advocacy. Because one of the examples, I think, from memory before the 2017 election, leading up to Labour was making a lot of noise around capital gains tax. And that's a political reality, is they're running on an idea. They're getting the country excited, and people voted for them. But they formed a government with New Zealand First, got the tax working group going, and they didn't get enough votes to pass capital gains tax, and that was that, right? I mean, obviously, you could go we can go 10 rounds around the whole stealth capital gains tax with Brightline and so on and so forth. But the reality is, they promised a capital gains tax pre-election, they could not deliver. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, yes, politicians, it is their job to give pre-election promises, but it is our job to have, and then after the election, the work doesn't stop there. It is also making sure that the associations or any advocate groups are big and strong enough and effective enough to hold these politicians to account. So one of the things that Brooke Van Velden talked about when she came and gave a keynote address early on this year is that, in a way, it is in investors' interest, in a way, to make sure that there is a strong ACT party in the coalition arrangement. If there is a coalition government, you kind of like, in a way, maybe for them to be Jacinda's, be Jacinda's Winston, So
The good news about that too is, the good news about that too is he like sort of admitted that we spoke about a lot too on the weekend. National probably didn't do enough policy changes. We know we're in government for such a long time. But Labor's made way too many and too short of a time. Obviously, and it's more about doing the justification, the research, the proof of what they're doing. So I've really high hopes that they're going to do really well. They really respect ACT. They're good friends, the two leaders, but really respect ACT. And any of those, I think David Seymour's great at his policies he's sort of doing personally. And if he has good policies, they will bring in as a coalition partner. So I think together they'll do really well. And not only in finance and property and what have you too. I was really heartened to hear. And
how do you update the capital?
Sorry?
How do you update the capital without the bank being able to make your existing loan harder?
Yeah, I was just saying, in a perfect world, we all would have got revalued our properties in November, right before December. So that's sort of what I was more saying there. Yeah, now right now, if you only had 60% or 40% equity in your properties in December, I wouldn't be going anywhere near getting your properties revalued at the moment because of the banks to obviously. You can go get a revalue. You can go get a valuation from any valuer yourself, so you can do that without going through the banks. Obviously, if you get a valuation to refinance or whatever with a bank, yes, they need to pick the valuer for you. But I wouldn't go anywhere near that if you only had 40% equity in December last year, because you're asking for trouble. That's for me. I'm not a finance guy. I'm only saying stuff that I've seen a lot in the last downturn and a lot even in the last sort of 6 months, happened a few times. So that's why I'm sort of doing there. But yeah, but you can talk to Chris without Chris going to a bank or your broker. That's why your broker's not going straight to the banks in these times right now, I guess.